Hi, it's Madeline. I hope you are having a great day and welcome to this tutorial for my simple herringbone crochet wrap top. This is one I'm really excited about because I've been wanting a piece like this in my wardrobe for a long time, and I'm really happy with how this one came out. I hope you really enjoy it. So this is a really simple design where you're making the ribbing and then you're basically just repeating a herringbone stitch, and it works out really quickly so you can do other things while you're doing it, and hopefully you will love it as much as I love mine. So just a little note to say, if you do enjoy this video and you want to like and subscribe, that would be fantastic. It helps me to make more videos, and any questions, just pop them in the comments below. So enough talking and let's get started. So we'll start off with just making a slip knot, whichever way you normally do that. And then we are going to chain the length that is going to be the height of our cuff. So in total I am going to do 20 chains, and then we're going to add one as our turning chain. So 20 chains here. And then once I've got that length, I'm going to add one more chain, and then we're going to start working back along. So I'm just going to zoom in a little bit here so you can see. For this first row, we're just going to go straight into the second chain from our hook. So skipping that additional chain we made and going into the second chain there, straight through the middle, pulling through and adding in a single crochet. So that's just pulling through both loops on the hook, and let's just do that one more time. So into the next one, going to go straight through the center of that chain, pull through, yarn over and pull through both loops on the hook, and then you're just going to continue doing this all the way until the end of the chain. Okay, so now that we have our first row of single crochets, we are going to chain one and turn our work. And then in this one, we're going to start our ribbing. So in the very first stitch, we're going to go onto both sides of that little V on the top. So both sides of the stitch, and we're going to put in one single crochet. Now in the next one, we're going to go in what is the back loop only. So the loop that is furthest away from you from that little V, we're going to go just under that one and leave that front loop unworked. So here I've just put my hook straight through, and it's just one side, and I'm putting in a single crochet. And so then we're going to continue down the row, putting in a single crochet in the back loop only, right until we reach that last stitch at the end. So continue down your row and I'll meet you at the end of this row. So I'm almost at the end of this second row, and you can see I've worked in the back loop only the whole way down. And now I'm just going to find that last stitch, and I'm going to make sure I go onto both sides of the V stitch at the end. Then once I've worked through both of those, I'm going to put in my last single crochet. So you can see there, just make sure you get in right at the end and add in that final single crochet. And so you should have 20 every time, so you can count as you go, and then you know you haven't missed any. So then we're going to chain one, turn our work, and we're just going to repeat these steps for as many rows as we need for the width of the cuff. So for me this was 44 rows, and the cuff was a width of about 7.5 inches in total, and that's quite small, but remember it is stretchy. So just do the width that you need and make sure it's comfortable for you. So this is my entire cuff, and I'm just filming this from a later stage when I've made the body piece, but we'll now go through how to add the herringbone stitching. So I made this little sample piece to show you how to do the herringbone section. It's exactly the same, even though this isn't quite as wide as the 7.5 inches, but I've made these about 20 rows here of ribbing, 15-20 rows. And so now what we're going to do is, when you've got to the end of that width, you're going to chain one, and you're going to start working single crochets along the top. So what I've done there is gone straight into the top of the next row along and just put in a single crochet. And what I'm going to do is put a single crochet in the top of each of those rows. So you can see here that in total I'm going to end up with the same number of stitches across the top as the total number of rows. So I've single crocheted all the way along the top, and now we can start with the actual herringbone stitch. So what we're going to do here is swap over to a slightly larger crochet hook. You can continue with the same size. I just like going up by 0.5, so this is a 4.5mm, to make the herringbone stitches a little chunkier. So I'm going to chain 2. Let's turn our work, and then we're going to skip those 2 chains and go into the first stitch under both sides, and we're going to put in our first herringbone. So it's like you're starting a double crochet, but instead of yarning over and pulling through 2, you just pull through 1, you yarn over, you pull through 1, you yarn over, and you pull through 2. And in this case, we're going to put another herringbone in the same one, in the same stitch. So you're going into the same space here, yarning over, pulling through the first loop straight away, yarning over, pulling through the second loop, yarning over, pulling through the last 2 loops on your hook. And then you're going to continue down, just putting 1 in each, and I'll meet you at the end of the row. So I'll let this play with another couple of examples, and we'll meet at the end of this first row. Okay, so when we have reached the other end, we are going to mirror what we did in the first stitch, and we're going to put 2 herringbone crochet stitches, I think that's what it's called, into that very last stitch. Just make sure you've got under both sides of that very last stitch, and we're going to put in 1 stitch, 1 herringbone double crochet, maybe it's called, I can't decide now. And then a second one into that last stitch, and then you can see here that both sides are starting to go outwards, and that's what we want, so we can start our next row. So it's the same thing. We're going to chain 2, and then we're going to turn our work. We're going to skip those 2 chains that we just made, and we're going to go into the first stitch of the previous row. So because we put 2 in the end there, just make sure you go in the very last stitch that you made, and again you're going to start off with your herringbone stitch. And you might have guessed it, we're going to put 2 in the first stitch, we're going to put 1 in every other stitch, apart from the last one we're going to put 2, and so we're always increasing at the start and at the end of the row. And this is what makes this so simple. We're just going to be repeating these steps, increasing at the beginning and at the end of each row until we have the size of the body piece that we want. So I kept doing this for 47 rows in total, and this is what it looked like at the end. And if I measure along the side, so diagonally there, it's about 54 centimetres or about 21.5 inches, and for me that was long enough. You might want more or you might want less. So I decided to add a little bit of edging, a really simple edging detail with a twisted single crochet. So I chained one after my 47 rows, and I'm just going to do a row of single crochets to start, working along that final herringbone stitch row, just one single crochet in each until I reach the other side of the row. So once you've reached the end of that single crochet row, we're going to do our twisted single crochet. So chain one and turn your work, and then what we're going to do is, in that very first stitch, just put in a normal single crochet. And then for the next stitch and all the others, you go in like a normal single crochet, but then you twist your hook around before you pull through. So this can be a bit weird. Sometimes I find that my hook gets a little bit stuck, so just make sure you've pulled through all the sides. So I zoomed in a little bit here so hopefully you can see better. Go in, normal single crochet, keep it nice and loose, really loose, twist your hook around and pull through both sides. And once you do it a few times, you'll find you've really got the hang of it, and it leaves this kind of nice like a slightly rounded effect on the edging, which I just think really finishes off the stitches. So here's that row of twisted single crochets finished, and now I'm just going to finish off the end of this row by pulling a loop up, leaving a nice long yarn tail to weave in and pulling through. And so this here is when I have done two pieces. So you'll need to do this twice to make two body pieces, and then you line them up as such. So they're now two big triangles basically when you fold them over. And what you want to do is line them up so you create that V-neck at the top, and check that where you've lined them up, the gap, that's the gap for your waist. So make sure that gap here between the stitch markers is big enough to go over your head and comfortable on your waist. And here what I've done is I've pinned the back sides and the front sides together, and we're going to start attaching from the edge of the cuff. So to start with, we're only going to attach from the cuff to your first set of stitch markers. We're not going to go beyond that. So what you're going to be doing is turning your work inside out and then creating that first seam from your cuff to what will be the waist portion of your top. So my advice here is just to double check quickly that you definitely have both inside out. I'm just checking that my loose stitches are on the inside and that it is the opposite side of the twisted single crochet before I start. And then I'm just going to make sure that there's the same length from the cuff to the waist on both sides, so I've lined this up evenly, and then we can get started. So we're going to start right from the end corners of our cuffs. We're going to put our crochet hook straight through that last side of the stitch row there, and then we're going to do the same in the other side. And you can start with a slip knot on, some people do. I tend to just pull through and weave in as I go. You're going to pull your yarn through and just make sure it comes through both sides, and then chain one to secure. And then what I like to do here is I'm going to work single crochets. I'm going to go into the same space as what I just pulled my yarn through, do a single crochet, and then start working along, working up, making sure that it stays aligned, going through both sides and putting in single crochets. And here I like to start weaving in that tail that I just pulled through. Okay, so I've reached the end of the cuff, and now we can start working on putting the herringbone rows together. So here I'm just working into the side of that row we made on the top of the ribbing to start off with a single crochet there, and then what I do for each of the herringbone rows is, because they're a bit wider, I put in roughly 3 single crochets to each of the rows. So I'm putting in one kind of at the beginning of the row, one kind of in the middle, and one at the end. And the best thing to do is just to choose where you're going to go through and just be consistent, and that's what'll make it look neatest. But this is going as the underarm seam, so don't be too worried about it, just go cleanly through both sides. And I found that 3 single crochets was about right for not making the seam too bunchy and not making it too loose. So I'm almost at the end here, up to the stitch marker. I'm just getting my scissors ready to finish this bit off, and I'm just going to work into the last space before the stitch markers on both sides and put in that final single crochet. And now to make this bit a bit more secure, I'm just going to chain 2 and pull through and cut off that loop. And once you've got those 2 chains, you can just tug down on those to basically make a knot in the end. So because we're going to start working round with a new piece of thread from here, I just wanted to make this a little bit more secure, and you can just weave that in to the seam. So flip your work over and just repeat that process on the other side, going from the end of the cuff to your stitch markers, and then we will start working on the waist section. So this is what it looks like turned the right side out, and we have our seam on the inside and our underarm sections are attached, and we can start working around the waist. So on this part we are going to add some ribbing that is the same as the ribbing that we did on the sleeves, on the cuffs. And so what I'm going to do is flip my work around so I can start going from right to left. And I'm going to start with the side that's closest to me here. So I'm going to pop out this stitch marker, which really doesn't want to come out, but there you go, it's done. And now what we're going to do is start putting these front 2 pieces together. So I'm just going to find that next space, which is just after where I finished the underarm seam, and I'm going to take my other piece, which is that wrap over in the corner, go straight through the last space on there and go into the space on the other side, and that is where I'm going to start. So taking a new piece of thread, I'm going to pull that straight through, I'm going to chain 1 to secure. Oh, I've got a bit stuck on my hook. Chain 1 to secure, there you go. Let's try that one more time. Everything got a little bit messed up, there you go. And then we're going to put single crochets all the way around. So I'm just making sure here that my rows stay pretty much aligned as I go around, and I'm keeping to the same principle as before doing the underarm, putting in roughly 3 per each herringbone row. So when you reach the underarm seam just before you start the other side, I just added in a few single crochets here just to keep it neat and try and kind of prevent any gaps there. So I just put in kind of roughly 1 each side of the seam, and then I'm going to do exactly the same thing on the opposite side. So I'm going to pop out this stitch marker because I know I'm attaching the 2 sides together on the next stitch. And again, I'm just going to fight with the stitch marker. There you go, sorted. And then I'm going to put these sides together and do exactly the same thing as what we did on the other side. So you're going to work all the way back to that original single crochet row where you started, and we will meet there. So I'm just putting in the last couple of single crochets, and then we're going to find ourselves back at the beginning. And what I'm going to do to finish this off is I'm just going to slip stitch into the first single crochet that I made. So I'm just going to find the top of that single crochet stitch and then add in the slip stitch, which is just pulling straight through. So I'm going under both sides of that V-stitch and then pulling straight through to attach, and then we are ready to start the ribbing. So I decided to do the ribbing the same length as the cuffs. If you did it longer, you could make it into a full-length top, really, with the ribbing as the main body. But I am just going to do 20 chains, so matching that initial cuff length. And then when I finished my 20 chains, we're going to add 1 extra one as our turning chain. I'm going to skip that first one and go into the second chain from the hook, and this is exactly the same as what we did to make the ribbing for the sleeves. So I've gone into that second chain and I'm going to put 1 single crochet all the way down, back down the 20 chains that I've made. And when you get near the bottom, I would advise you just keep count because it's quite easy to miss the last couple, or especially miss the last one. So that's my 20th chain there. Now something went wrong with my camera, it didn't film that first row, so here's me showing you on the second row how to attach it back to the single crochets. So what you do is put in slip stitches. You put in a slip stitch in the single crochet directly underneath your row, and then a single crochet in the next one along, and then you turn your work. So what I'm going to do is film the steps again here for what is my third row but will be your second row, so that you can see it all one more time. So once you've attached back to the single crochets on the main body, what you're going to do is go onto both sides of the first single crochet row. And I like to do this at both ends of the ribbing, just like with the cuff. And then you're going to do back loop only, so that's the loop furthest away from you, all the way back up to the end of the ribbing. And keep counting your stitches in case it becomes difficult to see the end ones. And this is my 20th, so I'm going to go straight under both sides of that V-stitch and pop in a single crochet and just wander off screen a bit. There you go, back in shot. Then I'm going to chain one and I'm going to turn my work. So again, this is the same steps as with the cuff, just putting ribbing around the base. So the only difference is the fact you're joining it to the main body. So you're going under both sides of that first stitch, and then again, back loop only, all the way back down. And I'll show you that attachment again, because I know it wasn't ideal in the last shot, so that you can see again how I'm attaching it to the body. So this is just me quickly checking that I still actually have 20 before I put in my final stitch. And so there I have 19 once I finish counting. So I'm like, okay, this is my 20th, perfect. Let's find that last stitch and go under both sides. So then to attach, you're going to go slip stitch into that single crochet directly underneath, and then you're going to slip stitch into the one after it, turn your work and start working back up. So if you need to look at it again, just go back a couple of minutes to the beginning of that ribbing section and see how to join. And when you've finished here, we're going to put these two sides together and seam it up. So to add the seam, we are going to have to turn it inside out again so that we can't see the seam on the outside. So flip this over so that you're working inside out and line up your two edges, your two ribbing edges together. And what you're going to do, I'm just continuing with the same piece of thread here because I had enough left, is just go through both sides at the very end and start with our single crochet seam again, exactly the same as before. If you started with a new piece of thread, then just do exactly what we did when we started seaming up the cuffs and pull through from a new piece of thread. But if not, you can just start working through. So a slight difference here is because this was the side on my body, it's a bit more visible than under the cuffs. I went into the back loops of the chain and of the last row on both sides to make it a little bit less visible, but it's not hugely important. It won't be a problem if you find it tricky just to find each side, but it's one thing you can do to make it a little bit neater. So to finish this bit off, I like to chain two, pull through, cut off that loop, and then pull it like a knot again just to secure before weaving in all of those ends on the inside and on your seams to finish. So now that you are finished, I really hope you enjoy this tutorial. I hope you love your wrap top, and I'd love to hear from you. If you've got any comments or you've got any questions, just let me know. And if you did enjoy and you want to like and subscribe, that would be amazing. I hope you have a brilliant day wherever you are, and I hope to see you in the next video.